Chapter 69. Just as his second week on Anzidora came to an end, Alden had an hour-long planning session with Nia. He met her in the counselor's shared office space after breakfast one morning. It was just one of the apartments, with the beds in the rooms replaced by desks. "I have organized your next couple of weeks for you," Nia said, slurping from the coffee mug and sliding a binder full of papers with colored tabs across the desk to him. "It would cost you a fortune if you were a wizard, so you're welcome." She smiled as he took the binder. "I'm also sending you a copy through the system. But paper has its charms." "You're an organizer?" "I'm a lot of things at my age," she said. "Not your average slouch who never actually developed their powers. But my most valuable skill combo from a work standpoint is the C-rank skill day planner plus my original S-rank, locate resources." "I can tell from the name that the last one is overpowered," said Alden. He wasn't surprised she was an S. Having enough money to be immortal implied she was high-ranked at least. "It is," said Nia. "But it's not flashy." She tapped her temple with a green-polished fingernail. "All up in here when I'm using it, like a string of magically generated aha moments. People are never as impressed by subtle talents as they should be. Combine it with a couple of add-ons that help me interpret a summoner's tastes and a bunch of little spell impressions that do things like this." She made a series of swift and flawless hand-casting gestures, and all the junk on the desk aligned itself at right angles with the edges. "And you have a Super Pennsylvania. Cool. That's nice. You sounded sincere when you said that. Hanging out with so many rabbits has given me a new appreciation for their skills. Most of them are useful every single day. A lot of avowed talents look awesome, but how often do you really need to be able to dig a trench with your brain? Or create a tidal wave? Or incinerate something in an instant? You realize you're a rabbit, too, right?" "Yes. I feel like this is something I need to remind you of on the regular. It's been 5 or 6 years since I met a rabbit kid who wanted superhero training. And then we had to have a long talk about how only Grivex would try to turn a skill designed for dust removal into a battle thing. Check out the plan I've made for you. Let's talk it through and figure out what you might want to change." Alden opened the binder curiously. The top pages were detailed, daily suggested schedules. Each one had a color-coded dot at the top corner, and when he turned to the corresponding tab, he found printouts of additional information for each day. His first thought was that Nia had gone overboard. He didn't want to be this heavily committed to a point-by-point plan. But the more he read the plan, the more he realized how ideal it was. There were blocks of free time scheduled, so it wasn't as tight as it looked, and the things she had chosen to include were all exactly what he needed to be doing right now if he wanted to head to school in Apex in a couple of months. She had taken everything into consideration, from his high school academic record to his stated desire not to use his skill at the moment. She had even included some odd-hours tasks that implied she knew he tended to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Gustavo must have told her. Alden had been wandering the halls a lot, and he and the night counselor had talked a few times. "This is perfect," he said finally. "I know. You're unbelievable. I know. You've already scheduled all these meetings and things for me?" "Yes. Except for the ones that specifically say you should do it yourself." So confident. If she'd been wrong about him wanting to do all of this, wouldn't she have had to call a ton of people and cancel on them? "Thank you." She nodded. "Don't feel logged in, Alden. I've put all the things that will help you figure out if you're really sure about your decision to attend Jelena North High's hero training track on the first week. If you have a change of heart, we'll just brainstorm something new." "I get it." He checked the time on his new schedule. "And? Apparently I need to get going. I have academic placement test to take." "Don't flunk." "I mean I'll try. It's been a while since I was in a normal classroom." Line of asterisks. Placement testing was happening today at the main high school in F-City. A steady influx of teenagers with different educational backgrounds meant it was a frequent occurrence. Alden caught a city bus from the stop nearest the intake dorms. Franklin High was so large that when the bus put him out, He had to wait with a pack of other test takers for a campus shuttle to take them to the building that housed the testing facility. When he finally arrived, he followed a stream of other students, people from intake and island-born kids both, into a space that filled an entire upper floor of the building. It was one of the most alien-looking places Alden had seen on Earth. A low-ceilinged, black-walled, windowless room with individual student desks each placed in the center of their own large square floor tiles. One of the two room monitors just waved everyone in and told them to sit wherever they liked. Alden took a seat between two other guys who looked nervous. It really isn't an inviting place, he thought. They could have added some motivational posters or something. If not for the fact that some people were chatting and laughing, the room would have been creepy. The official testing day started at 10 a.m., and 5 minutes before that, everyone in the room received a notification. It was a system-moderated contract that had to be signed, saying you agreed to have all of your internet and communications features cut off while you were being tested. Reactivation of them would be reported to the monitors and result in an automatic fail. As soon as Alden agreed, his floor tile lit up around the edges, and the sound of the other students talking and asking questions cut out. Magical silencing. That's new. A list of tests he could request appeared on his interface, along with the time each one would take to complete. Nia's schedule had already told him which ones he was supposed to pick. He started with the basic placement testing, answered a few starter questions about special needs and how advanced he considered himself to be in various subjects, and chose the tablet option when it asked how he wanted to take his test today. His other options were through his interface or using pencil and paper. A drone of the small rolling box variety came to him and delivered a tablet, stylus, and bottled water. Let's see if that boost to processing has started doing me any favors yet, Alden said as the tablet switched on and a basic algebra problem appeared on the screen. Math was good. He got through all the subtests that Nia had recommended quickly enough. He blew through the most advanced level of the reading comprehension test in half an hour. Then he got to science and decided he hated the American public education system. Oh, so I'm clueless, he thought, reading through the first 10 questions. I am a clueless person, and I didn't even know it. He looked around at his fellow teens, all focused on their own tests. Or crying over them. Are they seriously teaching high schoolers astrophysics in other countries? Am I really supposed to know the atomic weight of all these elements off the top of my head? Listen, test, he said, why don't you ask me what mitochondria do? Let's talk about photosynthesis. Or even anatomy. I'm pretty sure I know where my major organs all are. He successfully answered about 10% of the questions. Maybe 10% is a good score here? He doubted it. Darn Enzidora designer babies, with their top-notch middle school science classes, ruining things for everyone else. He gave his tablet back to the drone after that and took a late lunch break. Then he returned for Spanish and Artonian language testing. Fortunately, the latter was divided into oral and written. He had a long conversation with a cartoon every single quotee character on the tablet for the first, and then he limped his way through the beginner I and beginner 2 levels of logograms before admitting defeat. It didn't ask me any logograms for magic-related words. I'd have done better with those. He'd been studying his Oriot book every day. He finished his testing in the evening, long after most of the other people in the room had cleared out. He assumed they were breaking theirs up over multiple weeks, but Alden's new super schedule called for him getting it all out of the way at once. He stretched, cracked his knuckles, and headed out. Before he had even made it back to the bus stop, he'd received automated messages from every high school on the island, letting him know if he'd tested well enough for their various programs and what year quarter level he'd be assigned to if he completed other entrance requirements. It was interesting to see the differences. Most Southern high schools were set up as 3-year programs that operated year-round. Classes usually took place on a quarter schedule, with students needing to earn a certain number of credits to graduate by the end of their 3 years. Depending on how flexible the school was, you could speed things up a little by stuffing your quarters with more classes or by attending all 4 quarters every year and not taking off the one they anticipated you using for a break. If Alden wanted to pursue a science track program he could, but he was going to be a Y1 Q1 or Q2 depending on the school. But if he wanted to be a general studies student here at Franklin High, he could start as a Y3 Q1. Basically a beginning sophomore for science tracks and a beginning senior if I'm just cruising through without focusing on anything at all, he thought, translating it into terms he was more familiar with. He checked Chelena North High's hero track. It said Y1 Q2, which was as good as he could have expected really. Their credit requirements were higher per quarter because of the extra hero coursework. Alden would get to skip a few classes, and at least he'd met their basic academic standards for entry. There was a big fat list of other requirements he'd have to meet and tests he'd have to take, though. Physical testing. Multiple interviews. And if he made it to the end of the admission cycle. Power and combat assessments. Gonna be a busy rabbit. Line of asterisks. I think even you might have failed the science section, Bo. And now that you're a high school dropout, I'm going to surpass you. I'm going to go to school with the GMO kids here on the island who all learned the half-life of actinium in 9th grade instead of spending an entire semester on The Great Gatsby. Stay alive. Talk to you tomorrow. Alden parked the bike he'd rented for the morning in a stand outside an open-air market on the northern edge of F-City. He had never been in the vicinity of this neighborhood before. It was bustling. Most of the signage was in an unexpected mix of Chinese characters and Cyrillic, and there were a lot of signs. He had to take a minute and talk the system down from translating them all because it was cluttering up his vision. He slipped through the crowd, trying not to stop and gape at a woman who was striding through the air above everyone else like she had her own personal invisible sidewalk up there. His destination was a breakfast spot, but it took him a while to find it. He was glad he'd left the dorms earlier than he'd thought he needed to. It was in an open food court area, looking out over the water and the bridge that connected F-City to Apex. The place was full of people eating at metal tables. The morning was cold and windy, but there were small portable heaters glowing beside some of the chairs. Alden looked around for the person he was supposed to meet, and just when he was about to give up and text the guy, he spotted someone standing and waving at him from a table all the way on the other side of the seating area. He was a short, athletic-looking man in his late 20s, with black hair pulled back in a bun. "Alden, right?" he said, reaching across the table to shake Alden's hand as he approached. "Yes. You're Mr. Banu. Call me Dave. Sorry I couldn't find you in the crowd." Dave chuckled and shut the laptop he'd been working on. "I saw you, though. It's my thing." Dave Banu was a B-rank long-sight. One who'd somehow made it all the way through the hero programs at Chelena North High University and gotten himself an honest-to-goodness hero job. He was currently working in Malaysia. Alden had looked him up last night to prep for this meeting Nia had arranged. "Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I know you're probably busy. Not as much as you'd think. And getting a call from Nia is really persuasive. She's one of the island's original avowed. When you grow up here, you know who the oldest S's are. You hear Rabbit, and you think of her. And you don't think of her calling you up one day and saying, 'Kid, I'm sending a newbie off to Hero High School. He's a B-rank rabbit. He's totally getting in. Come talk to him and make sure he's not ruining his life.' She calls you kid. You can't escape the kid when someone's that much older than you." "I see. I'd rather not ruin my life." Dave smiled at him. "I've got to ask. What the hell is your skill? Because I've been thinking about it ever since she scheduled this meeting, and I could not come up with a rabbit skill that would make her so sure you would get accepted. Not even S-rank ones." "It preserves objects," said Alden. "Perfectly. As long as I'm carrying them. Including living things." The other avowed's expression turned thoughtful. "Safeguarding spells and skills are really functional. And not many people have them. Especially hero hopefuls. They lack the flair that teenagers who want to be heroes are usually looking for. Perfect preservation of a living thing. That's definitely got applications." He leaned back in his chair. "The fact that you have to carry the things you're preserving is limiting though. A ranged spell has the advantage. especially since you're a B rank. And a rabbit. Getting up close and personal with danger is always dicey for us low ranks. And apart from that, rabbit is a vulnerable class physically. Your power is all in your skills. The system offers you guys proportionally very little in the foundational enhancements department. He gestured to himself. Take me for example. Even though I'm a B rank and alongside, I'm still a brute. The system gives me skill options to boost my visual and mental abilities. But it also gives me a lot of foundational points to spend however I want. I've leaned really hard into speed at each level, on top of the specific mental processing path I chose to give me quick photographic recall. So I can outrun trouble that would otherwise kill me. I do have a movement trait. Oh, that's great. It only works on ground. Ugh. So hard. Alden smiled. It's not that bad. I've never understood ground. I know ground shapers who don't understand ground. I think it's just a concept from an ancient type of magic. Alden scooted his chair closer toward the heater that was warming their table. It's highly symbolic. Old Artonian stuff. It's less ground and more fundament of the planet that supports our life. The longside gave him a confused look. Did you just say fundament? Sorry. I spent a long time on the triplanets recently. And I spent way too much mental energy on ground. If you say so. And you've already been summoned? Alden nodded. Must be neat to be a rabbit. I've only been summoned once myself. Did you get some levels under your belt while you were away or? 3, said Alden. I'm a level 4. Dave blinked. Wait. How long were you gone? Almost 7 months. Holy, were you okay? Did a wizard decide they liked having you around too much and kidnap you? I'm okay. There was a teleportation mishap. I ended up stuck on the moon without a system so I couldn't get back home. That was you? I heard about that. Alden grimaced. Really? Yeah. I mean, nothing specific. But systems aren't supposed to break. A story like that is going to get around. Alden didn't reply. Well, I can see why Nia thought you had a good chance of getting in despite the obvious problems. Boosting yourself 3 levels that quickly shows strong work ethic at least. And a bit of natural talent. And your skill isn't bad. But, his expression turned apologetic. You should be prepared for the fact that it might not be enough. The admissions process is extremely competitive for B ranks. There are a ton of applicants. If you actually get into the school you'll see that the few Bs there are usually the sort who are so perfectly spec'd for some kind of superhero work that it's hard to deny their presence. He pointed to himself again. This isn't me bragging. I'm just an Anzidora brat who knew what I wanted for years before I ever got selected. I spoke 3 languages. I got so far ahead on academics that I basically didn't need to attend class for the last half of high school so that I could focus completely on the parts of hero training that were hard for me. And I started building processing in the specific way I needed right away. Recon. My brain is basically designed to look at a cityscape, flash memorize it, and spot problem areas. I was able to walk into my interviews and explain to the doubters exactly what I would be doing as a member of a hero team and why it would work. He sighed. And to be completely honest with you, I don't even know what my shelf life as a hero will be. If people get a little too comfy with mass surveillance, and governments start adopting it quickly, I'm out of a job. You'd still be useful in an urban corruption field, thought Alden. He was glad he didn't let the words pop out of his mouth. It would probably sound strange that his very first thought when an avowed told him they might be replaced by tech was no, actually, we're way more reliable around demons. So no worries, man. I think it's great that you're doing battlefield support, he said instead. That's what I wanted to do. There aren't many of us. You're a team player. I wanted to be someone who could use their powers to help other avowed maximize their own. And reduce the load. I used to think. I still think that the ideal battlefield support is someone who makes 1 + 1 = 3. Or more. Not the heavy hitter out front but the person in the background who makes it possible for the heavy hitter to hit really heavy. The one who makes it all come together. I wanted to be that guy. "That's so thoughtful, harrowing philosophy," said Dave, looking surprised. "But why all the past tense? I'm lacking in the grand dreams department right now. I just want to use hero school to make me into the kind of person who won't flake out and be useless in a crisis. I'm so tired. I want to be strong enough that doing the right thing is easier. I want to be a good person, but I'm not sure if I'm still up for being one of the good guys." He didn't say it because he knew it didn't sound right. "That's a problem." Dave thanked the waiter who'd just rollerbladed up to the table with an omelet. "B-rank rabbit. You're going to need to want it to get into the program. You can't be wishy-washy. Everyone will sense it from a mile away, and they'll want nothing to do with you." "Neil thinks I'll get in because I've got a star," said Alden. "A star? Beside my overall level number. It's 4. With a 6-pointed star." The long sight paused in the act of chewing, his cheeks stuffed full of eggs and bell peppers. He narrowed his eyes and swallowed. "You mean an official commendation? From the Artonans? For bravery in the absence of obligation? Are you kidding me right now? Greater than. No? Yeah. So, let's talk about B-rank life. You're going to need to work out a lot. Start before you even show up for school. It won't ever be enough, but you'll have to do so much of it that nobody can accuse you of not trying. You should keep records to show the physical training faculty. They're high-rank brutes, and after being gods for a while, some of them forget what normal humans are actually capable of. They assume anyone who can't jump 12 feet into the air from a flat stance just isn't putting in effort. Once you get in and get an advisor, you should choose your classes for your entry quarter as soon as possible, so you can send an email to all of your teachers and introduce yourself and ask for advance work. It'll go a long way with some of them. And group of asterisks. Mocktail break. Group of asterisks. After he was done talking to Dave Banu, Alden had another meeting. As if she'd known what the long sight would recommend, Nia had already blocked off this 4-hour-long period of his schedule for finding a personal fitness trainer, and she'd included recommendations. He'd gone through them all last night while he couldn't sleep, checking websites and reading training philosophies. The rabbit counselor had given him a ton to think about just by providing so many different types of trainers. Did Alden want to be an endurance athlete? Did he want to have fun? Did he want to mix in power use with his physical training or keep them both separate? Martial arts? Bodybuilding? Gymnastics? She really likes gymnastics for some reason, doesn't she? He'd picked the trainer he suspected Nia had known he would and massaged her to set up an appointment. Her name was Roberta, Bobby for short, and of all the people on the rec list, she was the least superhumanly impressive. A 50-year-old, D-rank agility brute whose clientele were mostly off-duty heroes of the soft variety. Several adjusters, a few shapers. She specialized in people who were less physically special. But she still worked at the fanciest gym in Apex. The annual membership fee was so steep that Alden was considering wearing a t-shirt with the gym's logo on it for Spree Day to make the other rabbits happy. It was really close to the Chelena North Campus, too. He left his rental bike at a drop-off, and took a cab into Apex. His evac priority card flashed briefly into view when they crossed the halfway point on the bridge. He was pleasantly surprised to see that he was a priority 6 now. In the event of an emergency, there were at least 5 categories of people who'd need to be rescued before him. The lanyard Kli Zhao had given him to wear when he came for Hannah's funeral had been priority 1. The cab put him out in front of the gym. It was a series of 3 large buildings separated by curving walkways, manicured lawns, and meditation gardens. One of the buildings was a menacing structure made of concrete that was absolutely covered in warning signs on his interface telling him to stay away from the place where greater men and women might accidentally drop a 1-ton kettlebell on his head. His building was the elegant glass one. Through the 4th-floor windows, he could see happy-looking people in sports bras and tank tops running significantly faster than was comfortable for normal humans around an indoor track. He entered the gym and had just enough time to appreciate the fact that they had custom-scented marble floors in the welcome area before a girl in lime green yoga pants appeared. At first, She had a look on her face that said it was her job to politely toss out the riffraff, but she turned bubbly as soon as he activated his name tag and told him he'd been expected. Did he want to stop by the free smoothie bar on their way to meet Bobby? Did he want to take a look at the potion therapy saunas? The Super Olympic-sized swimming pool? The morphable obstacle course? While she chattered and led him back toward the medical center, where trainers did their consultations, Alden tried to stare at all the people working out without looking like he was staring. This place wasn't like F-City. There were plenty of powers on display. A woman was climbing a rock wall with her arms tied behind her back. She was just sprinting up it in defiance of reason. One of the yoga instructors was folded up in a way that would have made Alden sure the man was dead, if he wasn't calmly offering advice to a small class of only slightly less contorted people through a headset. And even here in the weaklings gym, there were petite people casually doing reps with eye-popping amounts of weight. Am I really allowed to be here? I don't feel like I'm advanced enough to be here. Where is the weaker weaklings gym? Well, those were in F obviously. He had chosen this place for a reason. The girl with the lime yoga pants introduced him to Bobby, who invited him into a cramped office filled with framed diplomas and pictures of Super Olympians. The trainer had steel gray hair cut very short, laugh lines around her eyes, and she wore a sleeveless top that showed off really impressive arms for a middle-aged woman. So you're a teenager. A B rank. And a rabbit, she said as soon as they'd closed the door. Sounds like a fun challenge. What are your goals? I want to be less killable, said Alden. Bobby laughed and settled into a chair across from him. Okay. I think that I'll be attending a hero program here in Apex in a couple of months. I want to be able to keep up with. Bobby shook her head. No? Keeping up isn't going to be your thing. Physically. For a hero program. Unless you somehow outlevel the other kids so fast that the government wants to stick you in a lab and research you. You're a non-physical, skills-based class. It's superhuman in a different way. Just own it. Right. I guess I should have said I want to suck as little as possible? Let's reframe that as something more positive, she said, punching the air with a fist. You want to be the best version of yourself. That sounds good. She grinned. You sent me your stats, and I had a look this morning. And you picked me. I assume you're thinking you want to lean toward agility training with a side of speed? It seems like the practical choice. And I like the way the stats feel. I do need to be able to pick up and carry heavy things for the most obvious use of my skill though. How heavy? An adult person. Oh. Not heavy at all. To adult people? Sounds awkward. But still not that heavy. You're talking about doing it for hero work, right? Rescue? Alden nodded. Then you're looking at a minimum of 6 years down the road. More likely 8. If you're serious about a hero program, and you perform well enough to stay in one all the way through college, then you should be able to reach that goal even if you aren't focusing primarily on strength enhancement. We've got a few rabbits around here. It feels good to be fit no matter what your job is. The ones that get up into the higher levels and don't spend it all on being smart and pretty are strong enough to do what you're talking about. Alden smiled. That's actually a relief to hear. I just walked past a few people casually bicep curling my body weight, and I was feeling concerned. She laughed. No sweat. Actually, lots of sweat. But no worries. Most of the people here are mid-career heroes, athletes, or muscleheads. You don't need to compare yourself to them yet. You're probably not quite through growing in the normal way at this point, and you've only just gotten started on growing in the avowed way. They talked more about his wants and needs, discussed possible routines, and toured the facilities together. Next, while Bobby was putting together a schedule for him to follow, he headed over to the medical part of the medical center. This place was qualified to do the entrance physical challenge and North required to start your application process. It started out easily enough. He stood in a high-tech tube that scanned him for a long time. He had barely held back a protest when the doctor told him he'd used some magic. But it turned out there was nothing to worry about. It must have been interacting only with his flesh, not his authority, so it was completely painless. After that, he had to run on a treadmill and breathe into a mask. Reflux checks. Vision test. Hearing test. Blood draws. I hope Gorgon liked the new crickets I sent him. He had paid Jeremy to pay a courier to have them delivered to the consulate a few nights ago along with a bunch of snacks and magazines. Maybe it was just paranoia, but Alden didn't like the idea of leaving much of a communication trail between him and the alien prisoner now that he was unavowed. The Artonans could have killed Gorgon for whatever crime he'd committed, or they could have stuck him in a deep dark pit where nobody could reach him. But they hadn't. So it was probably no big deal to them if Avowed wanted to hang out with him. But better safe than sorry for both of them. When all the tests were finally over, he drank a peanut butter banana smoothie from the free place that was totally not free since it was covered by the exorbitant membership fee. The doctor examining his info scratched his head, adjusted his glasses, and finally said, "Obviously you can build more muscle and increase your endurance if you want. And you're sleep deprived. That's normal for new Avowed. Big life changes make it hard to rest. But this scanner does some esoteric tests. I think you're one of the healthiest people I've ever seen in my career. And I see a lot of healthy people. I got healed recently. For a week straight." He hadn't had an eye exam since he was in middle school, but he was pretty sure his vision hadn't been 20/10 before Oro got hold of him. By who? Anicorlax. The feathery aliens. Yes. How did you even meet one of those? The doctor muttered. Anyway, you'll need to sign some consent forms for me to send your info to CNH, and then you're good to go. They gave him a customized diet plan to go with his new workout regime before he left. This is the worst, he thought as he read through it on the car ride back to F-City. Actually feeding myself this way will take over my whole life. He wondered how much the rest of the dorm would resent him if he hired Natalie to be his full-time meal prep person. She didn't yet have the nutrition skill package, but she could follow the guidelines here. Maybe she could find a way to make consuming this many macro-perfect salads feel like less of a punishment. Better do it if I'm ever going to. A couple of years from now humans aren't going to be able to afford her help. He had the cab put him out by another bike rental spot so he could ride back to the dorms and see some new parts of the island. He was adjusting the height of the bike seat when he suddenly felt a poke against his authority. It happened sometimes. It was such a mild sensation that he was pretty sure it would be beneath his notice if he wasn't still smarting from the affixation. Someone just targeted me. He had figured out what that specific poking sensation was thanks to the other rabbits. A lot of their skills targeted the person they were helping in order to customize services. Like a haircutting. Other Avowed seemed to do it regularly just out of idle curiosity. Especially teens. It was concerning when you knew they had an offensive power set, so they had to be targeting you with something that would hurt you if they actually used it. But Alden had grown accustomed to it. They were just playing around with their new talents. Practicing. They didn't know he could feel it because they couldn't, so it wouldn't be fair for him to take offense. No big deal, he reminded himself, just the authoritative equivalent of someone taking a closer look at you than normal. Then, all of a sudden, Alden's mind smoothed out. The gremlin, who hadn't made a peep since Munthagund, noticeably relaxed a little. "Oh hey, dude. Nice to know you're still there. You. Wait. That was my peace of mind blowback. The good kind of blowback. The positive half of the extra word-chin sacrifice he had made to scare himself into moving faster on his death run had just come due. He'd been hoping to save it until he was having a really bad night, so he could claim a little sleep with it. Maybe before one of the CNH interviews that were coming up, to make sure he didn't look so much like a zombie. Shit. Even with the minor word-chin easing his worries, Alden was a little upset. Sleep and anxiety reduction were such precious resources right now. He hadn't meant to let the chain snap back on him. I didn't think it had been too long. I should have spent it before now. I don't need to be calm for a bike ride in the middle of the afternoon. Annoyed with himself, he finished adjusting the seat and looked toward the street he was about to cross. A few cars and a lot of mopeds and motorcycles were waiting at the light. And there, Across the street, drinking a boba tea was a girl he recognized. She was talking to one of the Manitron cameras some avowed used to record social media posts. Shoulder-length brown hair, perfectly fitted pink argyle sweater and a matching skirt, loafers and a pearl anklet. Hazel Volra. She wasn't looking at him, but Alden wasn't stupid. Someone had targeted him. His word chain had blown. There was the supposedly genius chainer across the street. She had an unknown power set because the Volras didn't like to share info about their toys. But Alden knew Hazel could do something like what the Gremlin did at least. Better than the Gremlin really. She'd said she could naturally sense word chain repercussions. Even before she affixed. He didn't know what that meant. It wasn't like authority sense, probably. Because his own didn't help him out with word chains much as far as he could tell. Something else. Psychic? Karma sensitive? Whatever. She did this, didn't she? He demanded of the Gremlin. Of course this wasn't the kind of question the Gremlin would answer. It was just purring to itself because whatever ancient alien dead ledger it kept was now all clean and balanced by its standards. It didn't care how the balancing had happened. Alden gripped the bike's handlebar and stood there watching Hazel's hair whip around her face as the breeze picked up. He briefly considered the likelihood that the chain coming due was just a coincidence. Then, for a slightly longer time, he considered the possibility that she might have been trying to be nice to him in some misguided way. He discarded both. Only an absolute idiot would think it was helpful to call in someone else's word chain debt without asking them. Maybe unevenness annoyed her, and she didn't mind screwing over other people to deal with it. Maybe it was just petty meanness. She can get away with it because nobody else is going to know they were targeted right before it happened. He probably wouldn't have noticed himself if he wasn't so damn oversensitive right now. And here I was thinking I was a little bit of a jerk for disliking her when we met last time. He kicked off and pedaled across the street ahead of a crowd of pedestrians. He was planning to ignore her. It seemed like the best course of action. But she was standing by the bike path that led to intake, and as he turned onto it, she looked up. She smiled and waved. "Alden," she called. "Hi. I heard you were back." Probably she expected him to stop. But he didn't trust himself to say anything. He tried for a polite smile and a wave and pedaled right past her. He didn't look back. It's not a big deal. Nothing to stress over. He let it go. Line of asterisks. The peace of mind wore off around 8 o'clock at night. Alden had managed to get in a solid hour of focused studying with his already out book before it happened. Now, he was deeply pissed off. He had already showered, but he went to the non-luxury gym on the top floor of his apartment building and tried to blow off steam on an exercise bike. He was going to start actual workouts with someone who'd be focusing on helping him with balancing his training and teaching him proper form tomorrow. He didn't need to be wearing himself out tonight. But it was either this or calling Hazel Volra and cussing her out. That seemed like a bad idea on multiple levels. Calm down, he told himself while he pedaled. The screen on the front of the bike showed a curving, hilly road somewhere in Germany. It's not a big deal. You're not hurt. You haven't lost anything huge. Someone was just a little mean to you. You don't have to be so sensitive about it. It was just that the meanness in this case was so uncalled for. What had he ever done to Hazel? He'd given her chainer. There was no reason for her to be mad at him. Who just saw some near stranger minding his own business across the street and thought, you know what? I'm going to mess up his day because I can. Sociopaths. Maybe that was too harsh. But he was still mad, so he kept pedaling. He'd switch to the rowing machine if he had to. If I burn off the rage and exhaust myself, maybe I'll be able to sleep. There were only a couple other people in the gym tonight. The adjuster was fetching himself for fire spells and planning to head to the Legion program soon was trying to figure out one of the weight machines. And there was a heavy-set girl jogging on a treadmill. They both had earbuds. Music would make this better. Alden had always liked having music. He didn't have to drown out the tinnitus anymore, but a really good set of headphones and some earbuds would be nice. He added those onto his mental list under the gym shirt. and he did think a laptop was going to be a necessity. Maybe he could buy enough stuff he actually wanted or needed to participate in the spree without being a spendy jerk. He did get what the other rabbits were going for, and he understood why they were excited about showing off their cool thing just like the other classes did. But it was still kind of. I could just wear a sticker on my forehead that says I hired Natalie to cook for me. That was the real power move. She had thought he was joking when he knocked on her door and asked what it would cost to have her supply him with every meal, snack, and beverage for the next few weeks. No, Natalie, he'd kept saying, for real. He knew she had been charging people something like 50 gold a plate. Her meals weren't just meals, they were magical experiences. He'd tried to explain that that was fine. He would figure out his own food when he moved out of intake and into the student dorms at CNH. For now, though, he had a schedule with 20 different things to do on it every day, and he didn't see how he was going to get through it if he also had to precisely weigh out servings of walnuts and scoops of pea protein powder before he put them in his mouth. His call notification flashed. Subtle brown. It was the color he'd assigned to everyone who wasn't on one of his lists. For total strangers. Who is it? He panted. Video call from 2763rd General View Lart single quote H, Artoni connection fee waived. Alden almost fell off the exercise bike. What? He said, so loudly that the boy on the weight machine turned to look at him. What did I do wrong? Who is View Lart single quote H? Why are they calling me? I'm on leave. He immediately thought of several reasons for the Artonans to be mad at him. Blowing up the lab was number one on the list. Corrupting Kibby with his human ways. Having weird powers from an alien who was rumored to be imprisoned for murder. Stealing an Oriot. Stealing a leaf from the forest of trees that ate nights and using it as a bookmark. Being in the forest of trees that ate nights. Knowing about the forest of trees that ate nights. Wandering around the primary's house without permission. Wow, the list is so long when I think of it all that way. At least it was an art single quote H. A night art single quote H judging by the system's use of the word general. Intensity level 99.9 for sure, but so far none of the art single quote H's had seemed hostile to Alden. They might change their mind about that if you leave their calls hanging while you have a pointless panic spiral. Answer call. Obviously. He was shocked that a call from someone ranked that highly didn't just automatically connect regardless of where the recipient was or what they were doing. A young-looking Artonan woman appeared on the screen. She was lounging on colorful cushions in a deeply recessed bay window that looked out over a very familiar forest. She had short dark hair and pale pink eyes. It made for a startling look, but Alden was more distracted by the fact that she was smoking some kind of charcoal gray cigar. Hey! She said in Artonan, blowing a bright blue smoke ring. Who are you? Not an interface-to-interface call, he realized in surprise. She was holding a tablet. It wobbled a little when she adjusted her seat. I'm Alden Thorne. Hi. Could Wizard's Butt dial people through the system? It seemed pretty unlikely. Yeah. Is my little brother taking advantage greater than of you somehow? Alden climbed off the exercise bike and started heading back to his room. Even just his half of this convo was bound to sound weird to passerby. Is your little brother Stuart? That's him. She wriggled on top of her pile of cushions and smashed one with an elbow. Is he bothering you? Is he being odd? Do you feel inappropriately treated? Alden pressed the button for the elevator. No? Is this because I sent him a list of links to things on the human internet? Baby Panda's sneezing had seemed safe, but Alden had never heard back from the primary's son. Should I apologize, or? That depends, said View Lart single quote H, twirling her cigar between her fingers. Are you taking advantage of Stuart single quote H somehow? I don't think so. I'm not trying to. The elevator was never coming, was it? He was going to be stuck out here having this unsettling convo in the hall. So, why did you contact him? To be friendly, Alden said. That's it? Yes? She nodded. So you want to be friendly. He wants to be friendly. Nobody seems like a victim to me. I'm cool with it. Greater than. The elevator doors opened, and he hurried inside and pushed the button for the 9th floor. Stu, the Artonan woman said, abusing her cushions with an elbow again, I guess you are right. A human does want to talk to you. She sat up suddenly, and Stuart scrambled out from under the pile of cushions she'd been smashing all this time. He was purple-faced and rumpled. He looked mad and embarrassed, and he started flailing for the tablet right away. It didn't seem to be going well for him at all. His sister looked completely immovable and calm while he tried to pry it away from her. Alden had a weird visual of his fingers scrabbling at the screen. He watched the scene with wide eyes while a Meister carrying some alien thing that looked like a 4-foot-long corkscrew joined him in the elevator. Give me that, Stuart said, batting away at his sister's head uselessly. He really is sweaty. H blew more smoke and examined Alden. I heard humans were always sweaty. I haven't met many. Humans aren't always sweaty, Alden said. I've been exercising. The Meister with the corkscrew gave him a look. Vuel, when I asked you for help, I did not think you would treat this like a joke. I like exercise, too, the woman said. Sometimes I go and hit things just to watch them vaporize. Vuel. Alden winced. Stuart had hit that special, glass-shattering pitch that Artonans seemed to reserve for when they were extra upset or talking to Gravex. Baby Stu, said Vuel laughing. Did you just shrill greater than at me? He looked mortified. If you want it that badly, little brother, you can have it, she said sweetly, handing him the tablet. Stuart snatched it from her and fled the room. Alden saw a familiar hallway, and then the Artonan boy flung himself through the door into his own bedroom and slid it shut behind him. He straightened his shirt, his hair, and his face so fast that it looked almost like a magic trick. Hello, Alden, he said, in a calm and collected voice. I am sorry it took so long to respond to your message. Chapter 70. Are we going to pretend like your big sister wasn't sitting on you 3 seconds ago? Alden asked in Artonan, watching in fascination as baby Stu morphed instantaneously into Stuart son of the primary, very serious future knight of the mother planet. That would be my preference, Stuart said primly. He took his tablet over to his standing desk and set it up at eye level. At the periphery of his vision, Alden could see the Artonan boy's hands casting a short repetitious pattern over what looked like a metal block. He felt himself smiling in amusement. He tried to keep it down to a reasonable amount. Okay. Thank you for the interesting cultural highlights greater than from your world. I did say I wished to study such things when we parted. I enjoyed the musicians. Alden stepped out of the elevator on floor 9 and hurried toward his apartment. Who is that? Stuart asked curiously as Alden passed by a guy in the hall. One of my neighbors. Another T. He's got one of the cleaning skills. There were so many rabbits with cleaning skills in intake. Alden hadn't even begun to memorize them all. I think his name is Paolo. He must have been right because Paolo looked back at him. Alden gave him a wave and hustled to his door. It opened as he approached, and he slipped inside, sliding a finger over the line on the wall panel that would mark his apartment as Do Not Disturb on other residents' interfaces. Do you live with many other avowed? I do now. On Anzidora? Yes. Alden grabbed a towel out of the bathroom and wiped sweat off his face. It's unusual that so many humans do that, Stuart mused. Avowed form communities on other resource worlds, but you've concentrated such a significant percentage of your population on a single island. Is it purely communal greater than or for some other reason? Officially, it's for the safety and security of regular people. I guess it makes it easier to separate us into convenient halves, too. Avowed stay on the island and follow the rules. Bad avowed run amok and everyone worries they're trying to take over the world. It's very premature for them to be concerned about that. A furrow appeared between his brows. Human avowed aren't nearly powerful enough for the Grand Senate to consider any request you might make for an authorized takeover greater than and power restructuring greater than. That's taken other resource worlds a few centuries in the past. And the percentage of avowed among your population is extremely small. Really, man? I wanted to talk about pandas, thought Alden, grabbing a glass from one of the kitchen cabinets and filling it with water. Apparently Stuart liked his culture chat more serious. What's an authorized takeover? They don't let avowed take leadership of your home planets without oversight. It's almost always disallowed by the original contract, so new negotiations have to take place and adjustments have to be made. And even when it isn't forbidden, the intervention point greater than is stricter for that than for other forms of civil warfare greater than. The 1963 agreement allowed humans to self-govern in most matters. It also allowed them to screw up and make war against each other. Up to a point. The intervention number was 8 million. When the 8 millionth person died in something like a genocide or war, the Artonans were allowed to come over if they wanted, or send their avowed in, to sort the conflict out according to their own preferences. Apparently the number for many species was lower. Alden didn't know how a collection of leaders had sat around and seriously insisted that they needed permission to make more people dead for human rights reasons. But World War III was off the table at least. The Triplanets had been more hands-on in the decades immediately following the creation of the contract, when the discovery that the rest of the universe was out there and pretty far ahead of Earth had caused a lot of upheaval. Nowadays, they weren't as eager to involve themselves. And in practice, especially for things like famines and natural disasters, the UN was usually requesting help before the Artonans offered it up on their own. My instructors say that humans built Nzidora for breeding purposes, Stuart said casually. Alden narrowly avoided spitting out his water. Of course the talk goes there right off the bat. Everyone knows that's part of it. Even if it isn't polite to say it like that. I think a lot of humans would like more avowed because it increases the amount of attention we receive from the Triplanets. It's good for the global economy and our position among the resource worlds. And the avowed here want more avowed, too, because it makes Nzidora more politically powerful. If you crammed a bunch of people together and made it hard for them to spend time with anyone else, they tended to make babies with each other. Super couples almost always made super babies. And raising kids here was basically free. I think there are a lot of other reasons for it, too. Alden felt the need to make it clear that there was nuance. He was not just living on some kind of superhuman farm. The old avowed seemed to like having our own government. It's good to be able to use powers more freely. I think I'll probably value being surrounded by people in a similar situation when I get used to it. There is a unique culture here, and it's beneficial in plenty of ways. I'm still getting used to it. But it's not only. Whatever your instructors said. He decided not to mention the conspiracy theory that avowed had been collected here back in the old days so that the major global powers could more easily nuke the entire superhuman population if Earth ever decided they didn't like being a resource world anymore. Stuart opened his mouth. What are you doing with that metal cube? Alden interrupted. That is a cute-looking metal cube. Stuart's flicking fingers paused over the metal cube, and he turned his head to blink at Alden. Cute. Ah. Wrong word. I meant the word for likely interesting small things. Heech. Maybe. Yes. That one. Earth was translating heech as cool, which didn't seem quite right to Alden. It's still too close to cute, said Stuart slowly. That would be a better descriptive word for. Well, never mind. I understand what you meant. Don't never mind me. Alden knew from when Kibbe was in the funk that phrase was a good bit more dismissive and Artonan than English. I'm actually putting a lot of effort into learning your language. Oh. I was rude. A little. Stuart sighed. I was only trying to be accommodating. Greater than heech is a very particular word. It's the interest a child feels upon first encountering greater than a pleasing new thing that is not beyond their ability to understand. You actually used it when you met. Myria B. T. Other Alden. Stuart smiled sheepishly. Yes. Other Alden. You remembered the specific words I used? Not all of them. That one was both uncommon and particularly apt. Greater than. Other Alden is definitely a hitch. Where is she? I released some bugs in her habitat for her to stalk so that she wouldn't cry while I worked on this. He gestured at the cube. I'm preparing the metal to make a spell ring. Interesting. Is it homework for a leaf song? Stuart shook his head. No. I'm not wasting time on the enchanting courses. They require too much of a commitment. But I'm going to want a couple for my personal use soon. I could buy them. But there is satisfaction in making your own. Alden poured himself another glass of water and hopped up on one of the counter stools. What are your rings going to do? Assuming I don't fail to properly craft and enforce greater than the enchantment, this one is going to warm my hands when the temperature drops. I'm making another for small object levitation greater than. Look what mine does, said Alden, releasing the water glass and letting it stick to his left palm before he wrapped his fingers back around it. Stuart raised his eyebrows. That's an intriguing one. I think so, too. It'll even hold my body weight. Only for half a human second. Did Master Rodin give you that? Sort of. Wait. Just Master Rodin? Did he lose his distinguish somehow? Stuart didn't seem like the kind of person who would be inaccurate with a title. He did. The Artonan boy pursed his lips for a moment and then added, the official stripping greater than was announced a few days ago. The campus was abuzz greater than about it like a summer clerm swarm. I didn't realize it was a thing that could happen. It does. Of course. It's very embarrassing for it to happen to someone of his age and experience. Poor Joe. At Stuart's look of confusion, Alden added, he told me to call him Joe. How bizarre. He's an unusual guy, I think. He's infamous greater than. For multiple reasons. But extremely talented. His summoning rights have been completely revoked now. I have labs next week. If he even shows up, I can't imagine what the atmosphere will be like. It was something else to have access to wizard gossip. Alden hadn't expected that from this call. I bet he shows up and acts like nothing at all happened, Alden said. And he uses just as many horrific swear words as usual and treats you all like morons. Stuart looked amused. Do you think so? I do. Call me and tell me if I'm wrong. About that, said the Artonan boy, I don't think you realize this. But I'm not allowed to just call you. Even if you contact me first. Alden blinked. You aren't? I haven't earned the right to summon avowed. Wizards my age don't usually gain provisional summoning rights for another 4 years, if they get them at all, and then they're monitored. But you can't even talk to me socially? I actually had to look up the relevant laws to check when I received your message. It hadn't been covered in school, so I was surprised when the system indicated I would have to submit a formal request before replying to you, and that our conversation would be subject to mentor oversight greater than. He sighed. It's not as though I would have trouble getting approval for it. But I prefer not to give people reason to gossip. Sorry. I didn't mean to cause you problems. You haven't. Stuart said quickly. Please keep sending me messages. I mean, if you want to. You don't have to. But you can contact me. Apparently. I just have to wait until the weekends to reply. When I can get someone here at home to make the call for me. That's why we're talking on a tablet. Alden realized. Instead of through your, he gestured at his own eyes to indicate the other boy's metal rings. Stuart nodded. And that's why your sister was sitting on you. Stuart blushed. Can't you forget that? I don't think I want to. He smiled. Ever. Vuel is very indulgent greater than and lacks greater than about rules. I asked her because I knew she wouldn't mind placing the call for me. I didn't expect her to shove me under her longer greater than and squash me for half an hour first. Alden burst out laughing. She squashed you for half an hour. I am nearly an adult, said Stuart in a peeved tone. Who does that sort of thing to an adult? Thank you for putting up with it to return my call. And your sister sounds like fun. I thought this kind of behavior would cease when I started college. I specifically chose to go to Leafsong this year instead of waiting in order to make a point about myself. It's not working. I worry you may be right. He really did look worried about it. However, I'll call you on my weekends. If you want? About every 13 Earth days? Alden asked. That sounds good to me. Whatever works for you. Stuart smiled and went back to working on his not-cute metal cube. Alden drummed his fingers on the counter. It didn't occur to me that young wizards couldn't just talk to any avowed they wanted. I really want to call someone. I have permission from your aunt. Aunt Alice? Yes. There's a little girl with her. We spent a lot of time together on Munthegund. I promised I'd send her messages. I can't figure out how to do it. The girl you saved. You heard about that? Stuart's focus was still on the cube. Were you under the impression that I wouldn't try to find out everything that had happened to you? I hadn't really thought about it. You showed up at my house with no warning. And then you casually walked around delivering third meal to people. I guess that was. Nobody shows up at our house uninvited. Grant senators can't even teleport into reports without asking for permission. After you left, I had to check with some people to make sure they had seen you, too. Just to be absolutely sure you weren't a hallucination. Oh. Nobody is sure who summoned the human. Or what they were doing with him to make him look so bedraggled greater than. I believe most of the household assumes you were a very powerful avowed who was invited in as a combat training partner for one of my cousins. That couldn't be further from the truth. I know. One corner of Stuart's mouth lifted. I rarely know something that the rest of them do not, and I am enjoying the occasional confused mentions of you. As long as they are not mad about it when they figure out I was just visiting. They'll probably just be relieved that the situation ended well, said Stuart, watching Alden closely. Nobody wants to run out into the forest on a peaceful evening and destroy an abomination that was once an avowed. Especially one my aunt admires enough to commend greater than so highly. Alden swallowed. So. You do know why you ended up here, Stuart said calmly. I thought so. You pretended to be a little ignorant when we spoke before, but after I looked into what had happened, I decided you were probably more aware than you showed. Oh, I'm way more aware than you know. Well, Alden said in what he hoped was an equally calm tone, I didn't think ending up in your backyard was the usual way for people to teleport into Ortona and I had just come from a corruption incident. And Knight Alice Art single quotation to tell me I was probably going to die because I was unbalanced. As far as my skill went. I am glad it did not go that way. You're sure you're well? Alden gave him a thumbs up. Great. The contract fixed whatever was wrong with me. I gained a few levels on my skill. I can preserve dummies who feed their body parts to sea monsters for even longer now. Stuart looked so surprised to be called a dummy that for a second Alden worried they were going to have a repeat of the prick incident. But then he smiled. I'm not going to give you the chance to try that again in the future. But your flesh is so high quality, Alden said seriously. Much better than mine. Think of the poor Mishnan. The Artonan boy blanched. I don't remember saying anything like that. You did. You said something a lot like, why would a Mishnan eat you when I'm right here, human? They prioritize quality. I apologize. Again. My composure was not ideal. Alden nodded. That's because you fed part of your high-quality self to a fish. I can help you send your message to Munthegund. So fast to change the topic. But thank you. It's really important to me. There's no good way to do it, though, Stuart warned him. If you wanted to send something very personal to the girl. Contract is secure and private by design, but to reach Aunt Alice's ship right now, you'll have to send any communications through official government channels. Yuck. Stuart nodded. You can choose to send it through them directly, in which case many nosy people will read or view whatever it is before it reaches her. Or you can send it to me, and I'll send it for you or give it to one of her spouses to pass on. They are sending Aunt Alice regular updates about the triplets. The government doesn't read her personal family mail out of respect. Probably. They'll die before they admit to doing it anyway. It wasn't ideal, but since Alden's main goal was letting Kibby know he was alright and finding out if she was alright, he had put up with it. Video's okay. Stuart nodded. Thanks then. I'll record it and send it to you. Talk to you in 13 days? Oh. Did you have to go already? Stuart's face fell. For a guy who was so hard to chat with, he sure didn't want to quit. Alden actually thought about the question. Did he have to go? Did he want to? I can't sleep. And I was about 10 minutes away from calling a girl from one of the richest families on the island and yelling at her. I don't have to go, he decided. But can we please talk about less serious stuff? Rust-colored eyes blinked at him in surprise. Were we talking about very serious matters? So far we've discussed politics, the eventual overturning of the world order on my planet, me nearly becoming an abomination and being hunted by your family, and whether or not humanity is breeding about. Stuart looked confused. Alden raised an eyebrow at him. It's heavy, he said. My only other Artonan friend is a young child, so maybe casual conversation between people around our age is supposed to be more intellectual or something. It's not. Stuart's eyes shifted away from the tablet. I've been having trouble enjoying interactions with my peers at school. I want to respect and care for them. When we speak about matters that are personal to me, it makes everyone very uncomfortable. And when we speak more likely there is so little common ground that I have nothing to say. So I have been steering greater than conversations toward academic matters or subjects of personal interest to them. His fingers paused their dance over the metal cube. I didn't mean to do the same when talking to you. I was happy you reached out. I worried. I thought maybe you were only being polite when you said you wouldn't mind visiting again. Alden considered all of that for a while. It sounds like you're working really hard, he said finally. And overthinking. You don't have to do that. You can just relax, you know. Stuart snorted. Can I? Yes. Please. And I'll give it a try, too. What's the worst that could happen? The Artonan boy's face said he was imagining several terrible things. I mean, you're not going to have someone execute me if I accidentally offend you, right? I couldn't. And even if I could, suggesting that I would is offensive. Alden shrugged. Then I'm going to relax and talk about normal shit. Shit? I'm gonna mix some English in, too. Because that's more relaxed. I'll be speaking Art-English for the rest of the night. Anglonan. Words. Alright? Alden slid off the stool and went to flop down on the sofa. You would not believe how weird orbital stone-echoed sounds to an earthling. I said it in front of 100 other people recently when I was trying to introduce myself. The contract totally translated it literally to make fun of me. I don't think the Earth contract would do that. Have you met it? Obviously not. It's less of a dick than Artona 3, but still. Artona 3 can be a little stiff. You noticed it, too. It's not just a VOD then. I'm living there most of the time. I use it for communicating and classes. With your eye-ring things. By the way, I've always wanted to ask. Do those hurt? They are implants. I can't even feel them. Artona 3 was so snooty. It wouldn't translate any of Rodin's swear words for me. There was no reason for that. And he uses so many of them when he's talking to you guys. I had to just guess what they all were. If you weren't exceedingly creative with your guesses then you were probably wrong, Stuart muttered. He never swore at me though. Made me feel left out. He never swears at me either. Does anyone? My siblings. My cousins. You. So only cool people. You're putting yourself in rare company there. Chapter 71. Another 2 weeks blurred past. Nia's schedule filled half of Alden's days, and his own side projects more than filled the rest of his time. He had his first of 3 interviews at CNH. It was in person but just 10 minutes long. Only B ranks had to attend the first interview, and Alden had the strong impression that the whole point of it was to discourage them from applying. The questions had all walked a razor's edge between professionalism and insult. Do you think your disadvantages will prevent you from being a valuable part of a hero team? How will you keep up with coursework designed for people more super-abled than you? What will you do if you spend the next several years of your life pursuing this only to be unemployable as a superhero? Joke's on you, thought Alden while his mouth spouted a pre-prepared statement about how he would never give up on his dreams. I'm just here for the best government-funded avowed education on the island. Unemployment is so far down on my worries list these days that you can't scare me with it. The questions weren't personalized. He knew because they didn't ask anything about the commendation or his time on the triplanets. No way that was getting left out of the real interviews that were coming up next month. Alden's entrance timing was going to be a little awkward. He was too late for the quarter-scheduled classes starting in October, but waiting until January to start the new quarter was a waste of time. So once he jumped through all the hoops and, hopefully, became a student, he'd be polishing off the second half of classes he was confident in and taking their final exams for credit. And he'd be auditing some others so that he'd be better prepared for them when they started back up. It would work out. For obvious reasons, avowed schools were set up to slot in new kids year-round. Alden was getting the usual package of avowed life orientation classes out of the way at least. They were all offered in some form at the dorm. He'd already done the 3 on basic Artonan etiquette. He was concerned about how basic it was, for his fellow students' sakes. But he guessed it was different for most of them. If you were only getting some in half a dozen times in your life, did you really need to do a deep dive into an alien culture that was fairly good about accommodating other species on its own end of things? Yes. The others didn't agree with him, though. It was mostly the rabbits and the other people with specific subclasses known to be popular with the Artonans who took the extra etiquette classes. Them and the alien fans. Alden skipped out on those since they weren't required, and he'd covered way more with his friend Klepak. But he still had to attend 5 sex ed lessons with Gustavo and a right counselor named Gretchen, in a large auditorium full of teenagers in various states of hilarity, mortification, and horror. Once you got over the subject matter, you could appreciate the necessity of the things. Even the first 2 classes, which were the Earth-focused ones, were kind of important. A lot of people came from cultures where sex education wasn't standard. And nobody came from a culture where the superhuman version of it was standard. The slides, because of course there had to be a slideshow, said petrifying things like, "That spell impression doesn't work there." And, "Stat differences matter more than you think they do." By the time they reached the interspecies lessons, Alden felt like he'd gained an amazing new power. "I'm no longer capable of feeling embarrassment," he thought, staring at a slide that was just a picture of a Gryvik with the word "no" written on it in 12 major languages. "I hit some lifetime maximum a while back, and now blushing is a thing of the past for me." Apparently it wasn't the same for his fellow victims. "I don't want to be here," greater than Paolo hissed. "What kind of crazy person needs to know this much? Why do I have to be here?" Greater than. Several of the other rabbits Alden had been sitting with during this wonderful bonding experience were nodding in agreement. "It's because the pH level of your partner is almost as important as their clear and undeniable consent," said Alden, pointing at a slide that said exactly that. Everyone stared at him. He marveled at how much he did not care. "I'm made of steel," he told Bo on one of his daily phone calls. He was on another rental bike, on his way to meet with a parkour club Bobby had introduced him to. They were mostly low-rank brutes, but not all. The group was welcoming and really eager to share the discipline with newcomers. Alden wasn't amazing, especially without his trait active, and nobody minded. It was fun. "I have been forged by Gretchen and Gustavo into something beyond immortal, and now I am untouchable. Also, Jeremy and I are finally going to get to hang out together soon. You're the worst for not joining us." After parkour, he sat on a bench along an oceanside walkway and ate his lunch. Natalie Quire was officially his personal chef. His fridge was full of meals and snacks in individual containers. She'd bought a label maker, and she used it to stick motivational quotes to each one along with the nutrition content. As part of their agreement, She got a massive shopping budget so that she could master her new ingredients. He was eating a lot of things he'd never heard of before. So good, he thought, holding back a moan as he dug into an insulated container full of hot lentil bolognese and pasta. How can it be this good and still be healthy? There was a small container full of herb oil to go on top of it. And a ginger matcha protein drink. And a side salad with the fruits and vegetables chopped into perfect rainbow-colored cubes. Alden was bleeding money for this sort of treatment, and he did not mind. Video call from 2763rd General View Lart single quote H, Artona connection fee waived. Must be the weekend on the triplanets. Answer, he said after swallowing a mouthful of food. He wondered if Stuart's sister would be crushing him underneath pillows again, but she must not have been in as much of a tormenting mood today. They were outside, and she only held the tablet out of his reach while she observed Alden. You're not sweaty. Not at the moment, he agreed. It was 50 degrees and windy. After parkour club had broken up for the day, he'd thrown on the cable knit sweater Dragon Rabbit had gotten for him. My brother wants to talk to you again. I want to talk to him, too. She tilted her head. I know who you are now. You're the dead human he named his pet after. Alden paused in the act of digging his fork into the pasta. Did you not realize that when you saw my name last time? I noticed. But I thought you were dead. So I assumed a lot of humans had the same name. That's what real art single quote H assumed, too. The art single quote HS must not hang out with many of us. My name's not particularly common. Vuel, said Stuart, peering at Alden from around his sister's arm, just give me the tablet. Please? Okay, she said, shrugging as she passed it over. The human doesn't seem to mind your strangeness greater than. I guess it works. Stuart glared at her, but he took the tablet without comment and hurried off into the trees to get some distance from her. I have messages for you from Kev B. 11 of them. 11 messages from Kibby. Alden couldn't think of a single thing that would have made him happier. Stuart blinked. Your smile is very wide. I was worried people would change their minds about letting the human talk to her. Stuart's face went still. Alden realized he'd been too honest. And then, wonder of wonders, Stuart single quote H navigated the two of them around a point of social awkwardness all by himself. I figured out why you enjoy the word H so much. You've been watching a lot of children's shows. Do you actually like the good child genre greater than? I always found those stressful when I was young. How can you tell? I didn't view your messages from the girl. But she gave each one a very long title so that you could sort them by subject. She wants to talk to you about those shows, demons, the videos of the ocean you sent her, recipes for something she calls stripy birthday goo, and your evil cat. Cat, said Alden, grinning broadly. Kibby pronounced it a little funny. My evil cat. Oh. He stared off into the distance for a second, and then he said, a common small pet on Earth. Stuart always looked like he was staring off into space when he accessed information through the eye rings. Alden had seen him do it several times during their previous, very long conversation. Most often to look up the English swear words Alden had been using to enforce casualness. It's unusual that he doesn't do the split eye thing much. In fact, now that he was thinking about it, Alden couldn't remember if he'd ever seen Stuart do it. He was fairly sure the other boy could split his focus like other Artonans, since he'd been able to carry on a conversation while hand-casting on his metal block for the spell ring. Maybe he didn't like double visuals. How was your week? Alden asked. Busy. Not in an enjoyable way. I had too much work that seems irrelevant to my future. How was Rodin? Stuart hopped up on a giant tree root and took a seat. You were only partially right with your guess. He didn't swear at us as much as usual. He did it more. It scared one of my assistants so badly that I gave her permission to leave, but that made her scared that I was upset with her. So I gave her permission to stay. And then she said she was worried she had pressured me with her emotions, and now I don't even know what to do to reassure her. Alden took another bite of his pasta. I've never had an assistant, so I can't help you there. Stuart sighed. I've never had personal ones either. And I grew up around the people who work for us at home. A couple of them are even distant relatives. It was never so strange. Multiple assistants are necessary for school, though. Labs and a few other classes require more than one set of hands. My week. It's been 2 human weeks actually, and they were busy, too. But it's mostly been the enjoyable kind of busy for me. Alden smacked his lips. You really like whatever you're eating, don't you? You'll just have to forgive me. Alden pointed his fork at his bowl. This was made by an S-rank Ryabi single quotee with cook of the moment. I'm not going to put it away and let it get cold while we talk. I don't know which human skill names correspond to which skills. You guys read skills as a kind of spell code? Stuart raised an eyebrow. We can. There are so many. And they're much more complicated than most spells. And they're usually redesigned and affixed slightly differently for each species. If you don't already know what they do, and you don't want to trust that they'll do what the contracts tell you they will for some reason, then you have to actually take a look at how they're built. It's a pain greater than, from what I understand. I haven't taken classes in that subject area yet. I just meant I wasn't sure if it was one of the Ryabi single quotee cooking skills I've experienced at special meals before or not. I only know it tastes like someone made this just for me. I've never eaten it before, but it feels like comfort food. Like something I have fond memories of eating in the past, even though I don't. And it smells like happiness. Oh, said Stuart, giving him a small smile. I do know that one. Do you want to be alone with it? Alden shook his head. I'm fine. I eat 3 meals and 2 snacks like this every day now. For first meal I had an almond muffin so good that, for a second, my vision blurred. You're having someone cook for you with that skill 5 times a day? Alden opened his rainbow cube salad and dug his fork in eagerly. Stuart stared at him. There is a boy in my student house whose family has their long-term Ryabi single quotee teleported to campus every night to tuck him in greater than. She preps the room for ideal slumber and maintains a soothing environment for him until he falls asleep. Until now, I thought that was the most excessively luxurious use of magical resources I would ever see from someone my own age. No way, said Alden. I met those Leaf Song kids. They can do so much worse. And sleep is very important. I should find a soothing environment maintainer for myself. You're going to warp the pleasure centers in your brain. There are probably healers for that. You're just jealous because the salad dressing tastes like angel tears. I bet you can sense it from our tone of eye. While Stuart tried to figure out the phrase angel tears, Alden finished off his lunch. Now I have to go suffer for a couple of hours, he said. At the gym. With my trainer. You can hang out in my head if you want to, but it'll probably be boring. Stuart looked fascinated by the idea of watching someone else work out. Because despite improvements, he was still weird as heck. Why are you training? For fitness. Humans do that. Also, for not looking like I'm lazy at school. Is that a risk? I'm going to school with people more powerful than me. Soon. Everyone seems to think it's going to be difficult for me to fit in. They are probably right. Why do it then? Because. Alden had been concealing his true thoughts a lot lately. Sometimes out of necessity, sometimes because it was just easier not to give everyone else an opening to pry at painful things. But occasionally, some expression would cross Stuart's face that reminded him of what the boy had looked like that day. When he was younger. When he watched his father and his sister in the snow. I was really scared for a long time, Alden said eventually. I think I still am. I need to get over it. Throwing myself at something challenging that will make me stronger might not be a perfect answer, but it seems like an answer. So I'm chasing it. Stuart sat there quietly, leaning back against the trunk of the tree for ages. Finally, just when Alden thought the other boy must have decided that the best answer was none at all, he said, I wish you were my classmate at Leaf Song. I think that one would be too much of a challenge for me. I still wish it, said Stuart, staring up into the branches. You never say anything that makes me hate you. Line of asterisks. A few nights after that conversation, Alden finally got 9 solid hours of only mildly restless sleep for the first time since he'd made it back to Earth. He woke up feeling almost like he was really among the living. Lying in bed with the early morning sun streaming through the window, he took a deep breath and a deep look at himself. It was always in the corner of his mind, but he'd avoided giving it his deliberate focus for weeks. Am I okay now? He was not. But he was okayer, definitely, than he had been. For the first time, he traced the new edges of his skill on purpose. He held his authority in check, and he didn't allow it to batter and rend itself in the way it had been trying to do ever since that day. Slowly, carefully, he took in the affixation. It was bigger. Stronger. A bit more complicated. New buttons to press. He was both less and more than he had been when he left the lab behind. That's all right, he told himself. It's not only a bad thing. A portion of him was still free. More than there had been right after the binding, he thought. Though maybe that was just reason seeing things more clearly than his emotions had. Enough to cast a spell with. Alden thought so. Not the Orion spells yet. But the one that lit the promise sticks. The one that made the little song in the air. The hand sanitizer spell. They had been his. He wanted them again. But I don't think that's the best way to start back. He put a lot of thought into it while he took his time getting dressed. Starting back with the kiddie wizardry, which he craved and knew he was going to love just as much as he had before, was a mindset problem. Do you want to hate your skill more than you have to? She'd asked him that. And he didn't. He wanted to like it like the other avowed did. Or at least be proud of it. Or get some little thrill from it, like he had before he'd known. Assuming he passed his upcoming second interview, he had just a little more than 2 weeks before he'd be required to use his powers for Chilena North High's talent and combat assessments. The latest updates Nia had made to his schedule called for him going on a campus tour today. Just a couple of hours from now. It seemed like a good morning for a debut. He walked across the hall and knocked on the door of the girl's apartment. Elijah answered. The other rabbit was in her pajamas still, and she wore a suspicious look until she saw him. Oh, it's just you. Greater than. Harsh. I thought you were one of the stalkers. Greater than. She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. You're not a stalker. You're the bad person who stole our chef. Greater than. She still cooks for you guys. Not nearly as often. Greater than. Alden smiled. Is there still vegan ice cream stuff? And is Hey Diza in? Hey Diza. Greater than Elijah shouted, stepping aside to let Alden in. The thief wants you. Greater than. In the girl's apartment, there was Elijah with her chip paint skill, the girl with Taylor Environment, Natalie, and Hey Diza. The Nigerian rabbit was a B rank like Alden. She had a skill that made small objects more beautiful. It wasn't like Taylor Environment or the hair cutting. She didn't have to do or arrange anything by hand. She just pointed at things the size of a shoebox or smaller and, whatever they were, they got more aesthetically pleasing in a dozen tiny ways. It was a fun skill to watch work. One of those that really looked like magic. Hi, Hey Diza, he said when she came out of her room and gave him a curious look. Can't I buy the world's prettiest ice cream cone from you? Yes, she said. I'd like that. What are you going to do with it? Greater than, I'm going to carry it around in my pocket all morning. Elijah gasped. Natalie. Come out here. Alden's finally going to show off his skill. Greater than. I am. My very impressive ice cream carrying skill. Peer pressure was good in this case. It would keep him from throwing the ice cream across the room if it hurt really bad. Natalie dashed out of her own room with her toothbrush in her hand. Did he do it? Did I miss it? It's really not that great. She wiped foam off her chin with the back of her arm. Her gold eyes were excited. Hey Diza started pulling things out of the fridge and freezer. The second fridge and freezer. The first thing Natalie had done when Alden started paying her was buy a ton of new kitchen stuff. She was going to take it all with her when she left intake, but for now their apartment looked ridiculous. There were 6 cookbooks open on the counter, and there were flour spatters on the walls. Both fridges were totally crammed with experiments. There was a new electronic pizza oven half unboxed in the corner. Alden sat down and watched. Never had an ice cream cone had so much input from so many people who were deeply invested in its final appearance. "Why are you starting with an ice cream?" Greater than Elijah asked. Alden watched Hadassah and Natalie put sprinkles on top of raspberry sauce. "Nia says you should do things just because they bring you joy sometimes. And I think carrying ice cream around in my pockets when nobody else can do that is neat." The other rabbit nodded. The triple-decker ice cream cone was completed. It was pretty before Hadassah even did her thing, but then she pointed at it, and it turned into something that looked like it had been clipped from a magazine cover. The sauce turned glossy, bordering on glittery, the sprinkles were suddenly perfectly distributed, the vanilla coconut ice cream got whiter, the chocolate banana got darker, the strawberry turned lipstick pink. The scoops even looked rounder. "Do we think it's an illusion? Or does it really do stuff to all of it?" Alden asked. "It's magic," greater than Elijah said with a shrug. "Now you do yours," Natalie said eagerly. "Right," said Alden. He felt nervous. "Just let me target Hadassah." He could have pointed, or set target Hadassah, and the system would have flipped an internal switch for him. He had never actually targeted someone without the assist, since he'd simply refused to let the target on Kibby drop for months for fear it might not work. But he remembered the feel of it. The weight of that pull between him and his target. He wanted to do it himself. He found the place inside him, the permanently bound mote of his authority that would never do anything again except for this one specific task. He woke it up. He flexed it. Her, he thought. Hadassah. He felt an ache. He felt the connection. A halo of white appeared over her head on his interface. She didn't feel anything. She was waiting for some indication that he'd done it. So he pointed at her. She smiled and held out the ice cream cone. "All right," thought Alden. "I'm the bearer of all burdens. I ran across a moon. I think I can handle a little frozen dessert." He took it from her. He wrapped his skill around it. Consciously. Deliberately. It worked just like it was supposed to. Of course. His bound authority was still oversensitive, but it did its job flawlessly. He slid off the stool. "The damn carriage rule is still in effect. I'm going to work on breaking that down as soon as possible." Did it work? Greater than. "It did," said Alden. "Sorry, it doesn't look very impressive." He glanced down at the preserved ice cream. Then he shoved it into the pocket of his hoodie and walked around their living area with it before pulling it out and revealing that it was totally unharmed. They applauded. And then, "I'll get the blowtorch," Natalie cried. "Excuse me. It's just a little one. For creme brulee and meringue. That would be fine. But it probably wasn't going to feel good. Can't I slap it?" Greater than Elijah asked, heading toward Alden with her hand outstretched. "Where's the really sharp knife?" Greater than Hadassah muttered. "Were they always this violent?" Alden wondered, looking down at his perfect ice cream. "Were they just waiting for their chance ever since I told them I could carry bombs?" Elijah slapped the ice cream lightly. And then, excited by her failure to do any harm to it, she did it a second time with what was probably every bit of her F-rank upper body strength. "Oh. Greater than," she said, shaking her bright red palm. "You should meet my friend Jeremy." The slap was nothing. There wasn't really an increase in pain or even difficulty. Alden had detected it. Even with his eyes closed, he would have known something had impacted his object. But it was nothing at all like. Well, what did you expect? A girl slapping your preserved object to feel like a chaos assault on Kibby? Curious, he let the girls experiment. The knife was fine. The blowtorch was fine. It was just a little baby blowtorch, like she had said, but still. So this is what powering up the skill does for you. Can't I hit it now? Natalie asked, flipping a meat hammer in one hand. That depends, said Alden warily. You're an S rank. You didn't. What's your strength stat? That's sweet. He thinks you look like that naturally. Greater than. Alden didn't. But just because she'd clearly put the lion's share of the free points she would have gotten as an S into appeal, that didn't necessarily mean she'd put all of them. I put all my extra points in appeal. Natalie said cheerfully. I am stronger. Because it's more appealing if you move well, and that takes strength. But it's nothing crazy. Oka, she walloped the ice cream and then laughed excitedly when the hammer flew out of her hand and across the room. This is the best. Let's take him upstairs and see if the Meisters can break it. There's that girl with the katana. Greater than. I have to go on a tour now, said Alden, grinning in spite of himself. You scary people need to leave me alone. He tucked the ice cream in his pocket and left. He waited until he was out on the street to say, System, ditch the targeting assist. And the halo. I don't need it. The point of light that represented Hades' location winked out. He could feel where she was still. He focused on the preservation for the rest of the morning. It was so easy. Despite the pain, it was just so much easier. And when he pulled his triple-decker ice cream cone out of his pocket in the middle of the tour and finally ate it, earning a few curious looks from the other people in the group, he did feel a little bit cool. Tobe continued. Thanks for listening.